we often take loads in a sleeper truck. I have a day cab and a sleeper truck, and myself and gentleman that drives with me, we'll take runs, and he'll be in a sleeper. Is it required after you in his off duty time that he be in the sleeper, or is it permitted that he could ride in the passenger seat?
He is allowed to ride in the passenger seat. It used to be up for 2 hours, but because they changed the split sleeper, he can ride in there up to 3 hours, right? So an hour before, 7 in the sleeper, then 2 hours after. Does that make sense?
It does.
And if you look at the definition of on duty time, it says that resting in a commercial motor vehicle is all right. And that's where it talks about it. So I'll show you in the regs where it says that, right? Because this is actually good that we haven't really talked about this much, but FMCSA, this is the government website that regulates truckers. Yes. Right here in this first bullet, this is the regulations. You get it?
Okay.
Over here is the interpretations through the Federal Register. So to answer your question directly, when I go to 395, that's logbooks. So I'm going to navigate you to your answer instead of me just saying hours of service. Now 395.2 is definitions right here. So when I go to the definitions, and to summarize this, logging, right? How many duty statuses are there in a logbook? 4, right? Off duty, sleeper berth, driving, and on duty not driving, right? Those are the 4. 3 of them are defined right here in this section, but 1 is not. Which duty status do you suppose has no definition in America? It's off duty, because here's how the law works. If you're not driving and you ain't in the sleeper berth and you ain't on duty, you're off duty, right? So everything is off duty if it's not driving, sleeper, or on duty. Well, driving's simple. You're driving around on a highway, yes? When can you drive around on a highway without being driving? Personal conveyance, right? The agricultural exemption, that's another one, right? Driving around without it showing driving on a highway, right? So driving is pretty simple. You're driving around on a highway unless you're exempt from driving around on a highway. Sleeper berth is the bunk. You said you have a day cab. It has to meet certain measurements, has to have linens, if you can believe that. And the sleeper berth is when you're laying in the sleeper berth. On duty not driving is right here. So check this out. Right here. On duty time. If anybody ever wants to ask you, hey man, can I be on duty at a shipper? Can I be on duty riding in the vehicle, the passenger seat? And the passenger one right here, see where it says all time enter upon a commercial motor vehicle is on duty. You see, on duty is all time enter upon a commercial motor vehicle, other than up to 3 hours riding in the passenger seat, moving on the highway immediately before or after a 7-hour sleeper. Oh, right. There's your answer. It's that paragraph. You asked me, hey, could I have to sit, if I'm a teen, do I have to sit in the sleeper berth for 10 hours? No, because the on-duty time definition in 395.2, 4 III says you're allowed up to 3 hours in the passenger seat, but you have to have 7 consecutive in the sleeper. Interesting. That's kind of like the split. Yes.
Right. It is.
But you could do 1, sleep 7, do 2 as a team. You go to the Twinkie stand at the truck stops, like truck stop lawyer, I call it. It's where everybody's around the hostess Twinkie stand and they're all saying, no, you can't do that. You got to stay in there, blah, 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 So if you want to go through this, I think it's a good time. All right. On duty is all time that you begin to work or readiness to work. I keep saying work. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. This is all work. But now it says, if you are at a plant, terminal, or facility, or other property, or a shipper, it is on duty, and here's your sentence, unless relieved from duty by the motor carrier. Okay, stop. Derek, what's the name of your trucking company?
Duff Trucking.
Duff Trucking. Hey, guess what, Derek? You are the motor carrier. So if you have a driver at a shipper receiver facility and he's not actively working, he's just sitting in a parked truck, or he's in the break room, and he's not doing anything. Do you understand? Who decides if he's working in that scenario? You, because this paragraph clearly says you're working unless the motor carrier says you're not. Well, let's go to the next one. If you're inspecting, servicing, or conditioning a vehicle, the motor carrier can't say you're not working because this specifically says it is, okay? If you are driving, a motor carrier can't say you're not working when you're driving. If you're in a commercial motor vehicle, all time in or on a vehicle, except for resting in a parked vehicle. Oh, so if I'm backed up to the dock and I'm looking at TikTok in my truck and the motor carrier says I am relieved from work while I'm watching TikTok because I already did the work by giving them the paperwork and backing up to the dock, yes? That entire time sitting in my truck can be off duty as long as the motor carrier relieved you and you're just resting in a parked vehicle. Does resting mean you have to be sleeping? No, right? If you're in the sleeper berth, well, you know what? Some people, some inspectors will say, nope, you're in readiness to work and you were sitting in the driver's seat, right? Well, then I'm not saying this, but then just tell them you were in the sleeper berth because that doesn't even say time resting. It just says if you're in the sleeper berth, it's not on duty ever, right? So if I was at a shipper receiver and they said you were in readiness to work, dude, I was in the sleeper berth, right? And sleeper berth is a status all on its own. You can't write me up for taking a nap in the sleeper berth at a shipper receiver when I was in the sleeper berth, right? And then we understood this one. Now, if you're loading and unloading and you're assisting and you're attending to it and you're readiness to work, that means you're not relieved from work, right? You're doing piece counts, you're watching them, you're making sure that no crates damaged. Those are all work responsibilities. A motor carrier can't say you're relieved if you're actively working on the loading and unloading. Does that make sense? So Bella, for you guys are unloading your household goods trailers, the furniture. You can't say he's relieved because he's standing around. That's work you guys do when you arrive, right? If you're getting assistance on a disabled vehicle, that means you had your vehicle broke down and you're waiting for a tow. That's work. Drug testing. I don't know how many times as an investigator, I would grab a drug test, go look in the log, and the log wouldn't show that as on duty. That sucks, right? Now, going and getting a medical card, that is not on duty because it's not listed here. Does it say going and getting a medical is on duty? It doesn't. But does it say going and getting a drug test or an alcohol test is? Yes. So you better have your driver's log that. Performing any other work for anyone else. Oh, I'll tell you what. How many drivers work Monday through Friday and then they have a local bar and they bartend on the weekends each night? Guess what? They're over hours because their restart, they worked at a bar. Right? Oh, that's actually this last one. Compensated work for someone who's not a motor carrier. Now, if you work for another trucking company, you can't do this. You guys want to hear a funny story about this one? It was ridiculous. I was an investigator with the feds, and a driver leasing company would give their drivers out to multiple trucking companies, right? Temporarily, you need a driver for a few days. Well, there was a large manufacturer of construction equipment, right? Which also drove around like a crane and rigging type thing, right? The manufacturer would hire drivers to drive and deliver these big cranes, right? Well, the problem is when the driver wasn't delivering your crane for 2 or 3 days, he was on another company assignment. So when I did the review as an investigator, I went in and said, I understand he only drove for you on this 2-day trip, but he's a lease driver. So I called the leasing company and got all his records for the week before, and the drivers were over 100 hours in 8 days because the construction company trusted the third party to monitor the hours of service with drivers bouncing around. You see, needless to say, that review didn't go so hot, right? So do we understand these are the on-duty definitions? We need all of our drivers to be able to speak to this when an inspector gives them a hard time about waiting for a load, right? Have I seen inspectors write up drivers under number 5 without giving them the benefit of number 1? See how number 5 and number 1 are very contradictory, right? But drivers need to be able to articulate this. They have to be able to explain it, you see? Hey man, did you like that video? Then here's what you need to do. If you're an owner-operator or you run a fleet, just click on the button on your screen. I'll show you how to lower your expenses and increase your profit. Make your company DOT proof. I'll see you there.